So next presentation up is Esko Reinikianen from Satori Lab. And I'm just going to update his presentation. Esko used to work for Monmouthshire, is that right, Esko? You didn't He's not a Welshman, he's from Finland. And so I expect this presentation to be a very interesting one, as he's legendary throughout local GovCamp. Here we go, Esko, over to you.
Right. Can you guys hear me okay, actually, if I don't use that? Yeah? Okay, that's not recording. And you people at the back there, nobody's buying from you right now, so you might as well come in and enjoy. There's some seats in the front here. I'm going to ask you to pivot from a passive listening mode into an active listening mode. During the next 15 minutes or so, let's get that timer going, I'm going to try to provoke you. And the reason I'm going to try to provoke you is that I want to provoke your immune system response to some of the ideas I'm going to put in there. And my ultimate goal is that if my provocation is strong enough to overcome your immune system response, then your behavior is going to change sometime down the road, right? That's what culture hacking is about. So epic failures in channel shift, or let's try and not screw this up again. And we might have a little detour, and if I've got enough time, we'll talk about Copernicus and Galileo. So one thing to bear in mind is, like, what's the context around these channel shifts? And as a human species, we've had periods in our history where we've taken kind of leaps forward in modes of production. So one way to think about it is we were hunter-gatherers, then we became agrarian societies, then we became an industrial society, then we became an information society, and now we're trying to figure out how to become a connected society. We're coming into this connected age. And as you can see with the plow and the steam engine and things, there's usually some technology which provokes this kind of leap forward, right? Another point to bear in mind is the time scale that it takes for one of these changes to happen. So it used to be tens of thousands of years, then thousands of years, until the steam engine, then centuries and decades and years. And the point behind this is that what we're here trying to do is not kind of position ourselves for the next period. It's to understand that change is now a constant, so we want to position ourselves in a way that we can adapt to any circumstances that are coming to it, and they're going to come more and more and more rapidly, right? Are you still with me? A little bit more to the present. We've come out of the industrial age into the information age, and now we're trying to figure out how to do the connected age. The arrival of the internet propels us out of the information age into the connected age, right? We got that transition horribly wrong, yeah? From the industrial age to the information age, because basically with the new potential for digital technologies, we just replicated everything that we had in the industrial age and made it a digital version of it. So let's try not to screw up this next transition that we're in. I'm going to try to give you some kind of like indications as to how you can handle this challenge in your mind and do it a little bit more successfully. So let's talk about communications a little bit. Back in the olden days, if we wanted to replicate a message, it was traditionally done by monks and candlelight, and they were like repeating and copying and transcribing the Bible. Yeah? It was the text, the piece of information. Then Gutenberg comes along and he invents this printing press, right? Brilliant. Now we can speed up the replication of knowledge and democratize information. And what did we do with it? Made a Bible, right? This is an example of kind of lack of imagination as to when you've got new technology and a new potential, what new world can you create with it? You just default back to what you're familiar with and you do more of that the same. Anybody recognize this? It's probably your primary communication interface, right? The email, right? Does anybody recognize this? The memorandum. To, from, date, subject. Email is essentially a digitized, like more easily communicable memorandum. So we haven't really progressed in our thinking much beyond traditional forms of communication. So our friend Albert says, we can't solve our problems using the same thinking that we used to create them, right, when we created them. So the challenge here to do channel shift properly is not to say, ooh, how can I replicate everything that I've already got in a slightly more whizzy way given the new technologies that are available. The challenge is, given these new technologies that are available, What new realities can we create that were previously not possible, right? That's how I think we nail channel shift and we do good things with it, rather than just building the same old rubbish again. So these are the new kinds of tools that are emerging on the market. How many of you guys use these, any of these? Or are you all in the email inbox? All right. You people with your hands down, you need to put your email away for a while and have a look at some of these things and see if they could kind of like offer you some value. Any of you use this? Yeah? Congratulations, filing cabinet 2.0. Yeah? Or does anybody have a really great implementation of SharePoint, which is creating? Yeah, generally not. Why are we doing this? It's completely crazy. I'm doing really well for time. So this is our bud Astro Teller. He's the captain of moonshots at Google's labs. He's grandson of one of the Manhattan Project. He comes from very good scientific pedigree. And he says, if you want your car to go 500 miles on a tank of gas, fine, you can tune it. You can optimize your engine. You can eke out more efficiencies. It's salami slicing kind of strategy. But if I tell you that your car now has to go 500 miles on just 1 gallon of gas, you have to start over, right? So my first kind of maybe it's not my first, but provocation, big, solid, clearly defined, is if we want to do channel shift properly, we need to do it on the basis of having created a new set of principles, right? Blank sheet, what are the principles that are going to give us some kind of good mileage and traction in the channel shift world? Reasoning by analogy versus reasoning by first principle. Reasoning by analogy is, ooh, I see something over there that looks kind of interesting and promising. Can I transpose it into my environment, right? So we get things like, it's like Uber, but for dogs, right? You take a thing that you understand and you quantify and you try to put it in a different context. And like, this isn't a joke, right? Uber for dog walkers is here. You can become a walker and download the app if you want. This is what happens when we reason by analogy. That's not good enough. I want to argue that we need to start reasoning by first principles. So start with needs. Anybody recognize this? You can put, does anybody not, do you not recognize this phrase, start with needs, with little asterisks? Put your hand up. Oh, brilliant, okay. Government digital service design principles, right? People are saying, ooh, what's all this magic sauce? Why did GDS do amazing things that nobody else could do? Well, they started by defining a set of principles which would govern their behavior and their action, and they could use to defend their decisions against maybe like slightly less flexible bureaucrat traditionalists. And they also start with needs. They emphasized that means the user needs, not the government needs. That is a fundamental transformational kind of mentality pivot, right? It's not about what suits the mandarins, it's about what's good for citizens. 67%. Organizational culture is the fundamental challenge to channel shift. I have to bring this up because I'm a culture hacker. But this was a survey from South Hams Council, so recent, this year I think. Were you involved in that? No. Yeah, so, okay, our challenge is that we're going to take on channel shift. What are the things that are going to get into our way? And organizational culture is the prime, you know, the most, this is managers who are going to say that. So why do I say that? It's to give me a reason to do a slight detour. Conflict theory. I have a peace studies degree, by the way, so I'm going to bore you with some of this theory. Conflicts have 3 fundamental components, all conflicts, right? Structures, attitudes, and behaviors. And they're interrelated. If something in a structure changes, it'll have an influence on the attitudes and on the behaviors, and likewise in the other directions. And to break down a little bit what we mean by that, structure is mechanisms, processes, institutions. So your policy is a structure. Attitudes are perceptions and misperceptions. They can be positive or negative. And behaviors are the things that we do, and they're generally either coercive or cooperative. So here's a little example. We might have this perception or this misperception as councils and public services that our best interest is to serve the needs of the citizen. Our behavior, when we say we're going to ask them what they think about it, we throw them an 80-page consultation document that you need a lawyer to interpret, and we think that somehow, so that's a coercive behavior actually. And so our attitude that we are serving people is a misrepresentation. It's a delusion that we've put ourselves into. Yeah. So I guess one of the components of if we're going to get channel shift right is we have to interrogate which parts of the conflict that we currently have with our citizens are actually our responsibility and things that we need to confront and we can change a little bit in order to reframe. So we get a lot of clients who say, right, we're done being bad to our citizens. We want to involve them more, co-production, co-creation of services. So we're going to create volunteer schemes that allow people to get involved. And the first bit of the conversation is, do you recognize that your starting point is one of mistrust? They don't believe you anymore. They've had consultation fatigue. They don't really care what you say anymore. And unless you recognize that, and you kind of factor in those dimensions of the conflict, it's almost pointless to start a process that assumes we can start with a kind of a clean sheet and there's no history and they'll take us for the word. Right, so that was slight detour. So what principles are you going to build your channel shift practice on? Threads here is, if you're going to do this, have a clearly defined set of principles. You can magpie a little bit from other people who've done it. GDS is not a bad set of principles if you're designing digital public services. Other people are thinking about this too. If this has worked, there's a new slide that came in about 10 minutes ago. This morning, Department for Work and Pensions tweeted, creating a digital delivery culture, we're going to work to those principles. Work in the open, some of these are familiar, yeah? So this isn't just kind of like some crazy idea I'm throwing. Departments are thinking seriously about it, and I urge you, before you go into any big channel shift process, is that you define and understand and deliberate and consider and catalog and codify the principles by which you're going to do this. And don't forget that you're not trying to replicate your information age processes. You're trying to explore what's new given the technology that we've got. So, yes, and it's not easy, right? All great truths at first appear to be blasphemies. So I do have time. I'm going to tell you a little cautionary tale, our friend Copernicus and Galileo. So for those of you who aren't kind of science geeks and history buffs and that, Copernicus was the guy who figured out that not everything goes around the Earth, like heliocentrism, stuff goes around, we're not the center of the universe. He published his work essentially on his deathbed, the day, around the time he died, his work was published. He'd done the work a lot earlier, but he was very reticent to put it out there because it was challenging the kind of the authority and the orthodoxy of the church. At the time that he did it, they were still burning people at the stake for like kind of too wacky views and stuff. So he kind of got away with it, and his book that came out, it was kind of silently circulated in circles. About 100 years later, I think, Galileo shows up. He picks up the copy, and he developed instruments, right, telescopes, that give him better resolution view of the cosmos. And he managed to prove empirically what Copernicus had said was right. Right? So it wasn't, I have a theory that we've been thinking about it wrong. It is, I have data, I have evidence, I have proof. And he bullishly kind of published his works out there and was immediately put under house arrest for the rest of his life. Right? So here's a challenge. One, don't replicate stuff that we've already got just with shiny new tools. Look at the new tools and figure out what potential they offer us beyond what we currently understand or know or have. Build a list of principles that you're going to use to guide your behavior and that you can use to defend your decisions against the orthodoxy. And finally, look into yourself. Because if you think that a successful strategy is to kind of externalize this and say, "Ooh, I'm going to participate in this other thing," yeah, I don't think you're going to get very good traction. The real change comes when you look inside yourself and you start interrogating your assumptions and challenging your preconceptions, and you make a conscious decision to break beyond that. Yeah, I think I'm done provoking you. Is that all right? Oh man!
Brilliant.